In the 1900s, then we have the psychological trauma, of course, by the hand of Mr. Freud. Now, that is a wound, but it is not longer a physical wound, it is a psychical wound. And the latest contribution to the notion of trauma, resorting to Google, I must admit so, is connected with a new field of knowledge, sustaining the notion of social trauma by the end of the 20th century, which is mainly based on the fact that there is a disturbance in individuals vis-à-vis an acute, sharp shock, such as the Holocaust, the Shoah, or any other genocides occurring in different societies. And they have studied social trauma. People like Latin American social scientists after the Chilean coup d'etat in the 1970s or the Argentinian military coup in 1976. So when I was reading this new notion of social trauma, I found out that this is absolutely consistent with Fred Harris' notion and with Guillermo Andró's presentation. This is a very specific topic. This is not a physical shock, a social trauma. You don't have a physical wound. You are not attacked in the middle of the night because there's a burglar breaking into your house and he attacks you physically, he assaults you. No. And I would add an adjective to the notion of social trauma, endemic social trauma. You know that endemic is connected with a slow evolutionary process, and by the end of any endemic process, individuals remain pathologically ill. They are no longer able to really view reality as such. So this is the reason why I will deal with the endemic social trauma. And this term is twofold. I mean, it has two notions. Number one, the shock you receive, no matter whether it's individual or social shock, suffered by a passive individual. And of course, this is a traumatic event, and he suffers a trauma. And number two is the remnants or the aftermath, so the consequences deriving from such a shock or trauma. For instance, a sword. For instance, you have a physical wound after a sword, after you have been hit by a sword. And I will fine-tune this concept even more. Endemic social trauma is connected with the finding out the causes for such trauma and the reason why there is such trauma, and what is the purpose of our own research into this notion. Because what is it that we want to do to recover our lost health? We must be lucid, bright, brilliant researchers and see that our current society is suffering from this kind of social trauma, an endemic social trauma. So we have to wonder and ask ourselves, how can we solve the trauma? Is this trauma reversible? Can we recover the arm we have lost? Or that trauma is indelible and it will last in the course of time? So, can we really overcome this endemic social trauma? This is a fundamental issue to us for two reasons. Number one, because human beings are different from any other living beings and organisms in the universe because of one single feature. In the universe, you have mineral organisms. As you know, they suffer chemical processes. but they are inorganic matter, inert matter. In that vast universe of inert matter, there is a very small sector or portion in one single planet known as Earth, where you can also see other organisms, plant organisms. So that small portion is the mineral universe becoming a plant universe. It is covering most of the continental area of our planet, the Earth. And if we analyze different components, such as the forest, which is so large, reveals the fact that organisms living in the forest that are much smaller than the forest itself. Any being or organism living in the earth is stratified or layered into different kingdoms or sectors or areas: plant kingdom, animal kingdom, mineral kingdom. In the animal kingdom, we find human beings. And human beings are very unique and peculiar, having distinguishing traits. The other kingdoms, plant kingdom and mineral kingdom, even though they are much smaller in many cases, are of a collective nature. There is no single rabbit wishing to marry a bee, or a bee wishing to marry a mosquito. They have their own life program, so to speak. And thanks to our cyber tools, we know that there are cyber programs and cyber software. So all those kingdoms, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, mineral kingdom, are not fully free. Sodium tends to absorb water immediately, but only water, not wine. It has a dynamic motion all the time. It's free, but that freedom is, of course, conditioned upon these requirements. We human beings come to this world to bear witness to all these things. We are born alone and we die alone. But, of course, we are born from the union of an ovulum with a sperm. And we come to this world because there is a pair of cells that have joined or united before to form one single being. There's a social effort, so to speak, a social effort made by our father and our mother. Chromosomes, 48, man. What's the mystery that we have when we developed a new human being out of this 48 chromosome union? This individual, this human being, has its own distinguishing feature, and the distinguishing feature is the spiritual component. And it has a particle in many different languages. In Spanish, you say, for Hicks, in German, the spirit, or whatever you may refer to, the self, soul. And of course, even you say I. You see, you use pronouns which are different. We have a sort of birthright, so to speak, as spiritual beings, a gift from the gods. And we have embodied our spirit in this living world. And we have this gift of being spiritual. And we come to this world in a very special condition. There's a book, The Naked Monkey. This is the literal translation from Spanish, El Mono Desnudo, where you can see how man evolves in the course of time on the basis of Aristotle, when he said man is a rational being. The expression is okay, but I add something else. It is a spiritual being embodied in a physical body. We may use this pun or play of words. It's incarnated in a physical body. And man has to choose his own fate and destiny. He should be free to do so. So, human beings are very particular beings who have a right to set the rules whereby he's going to govern his own life. But as man is a social being, he lives in a world governed by rules. When in Rome, do as the Romans, says the old saying. And the rules, the body of rules, help constitute and shape human beings in the course of their own earthly life. So, human beings are different from society. And there is a dialectical relationship between society and man.